Hello and happy Easter, everyone! Although Easter was yesterday and April Fools, so that was great. Anyway, well, I don't have anything else to say. Let's get started. Ahem. Chapter 7. Friend or Foe? After his time underground, it seemed strange to have the infinite open sky of space overhead. The sun, a tiny orange disk, hung low in the sky. Barely 20 degrees above the horizon, it cast long shadows into the depressions. The sky was bright with stars, but no planets declared themselves to Derek's eye. He did not know how long it would take to make the modifications to the augment. He only knew that the raider's ship's orbit was bringing it closer, and he had to be done before it arrived. He knew too that the robots would be pursuing him in a short-sighted effort to protect him. It was as though the jaws of a vise were closing on him. Somehow he had to squirm away or die. He only drove far enough over the rugged, frozen terrain to separate himself from the potential target of the complex entrance. Then he parked the carrier half in shadow on a valley floor and started off on foot across the frozen wastes. Though he was sacrificing speed in giving up the carrier, the vehicle almost certainly contained a tracking transponder that would lead the robots right to him. As soon as he was on foot, he began looking for the right place to hole up while working on the suit. He did not need sunlights for what he had to do, since the augment had its own work lamps. A shadowed hollow, a darkened crevice, a pitch-black ice cave, any of those would hide him without hindering his efforts. But the better hidden he was, the less warning he would have about the approach of the robots or the raiders. There's no having it both ways. While Derek hiked across the frozen terrain and excavated, using the augment's omnidirectional radio to send a series of distress calls, Derek did not know if the signals would carry over the horizon to the raider, and he feared that they would lead the robots to him. But he had to try, had to give the raiders a chance and a reason to save him. Clear channel code 1 to all ships. Pilot Maroon requires pickup. Respond in range, if in range. To all ships. Eventually Derek settled on a fissure in an ice cliff that faced back the way he had come. From there he had a fair view of the terrain, except for what was blocked by the large crags and mounds, and he had a clear view of the sky from the horizon on the northwest to the horizon on the northeast. Diagnostic library, he said. The lower half of the bubble-like viewport turned opaque, and a list of subsystems appeared on it in bright yellow letters. He scanned down the list quickly. Mode systems. One of the items near the middle of the list flashed twice, and then the entire list was placed by another. In the same manner, Derek worked his way through the help screens until the circuit and logic paths of the subcontroller filled the half-display with a maze of fine tracings. Derek studied the system carefully, his lips pursued into a frown. Frost, he muttered finally. It was as he had feared. The governor was not a physical device that could be readily connected. It was a feedback loop in the leg servo circuits. The loop told the suit controller, do not allow the force applied by the drivers to exceed a force of X number of dynes per second. Small forces applied quickly were acceptable, as were larger forces applied slowly, but large forces applied quickly, which was what he needed, were forbidden. If he had more time, there might have been a chance to reprogram the subcontrollers, but under the circumstances, it would have to be radical surgery. Fortunately, augments were designed to be field repairable, a practice which had saved more than one laborer's life. The various hands which the augment could use were located in bulging closures on the suit thighs. Derek selected an illuminated micro-manipulator for the right and a spot-weld laser for the left. Just then the ground under and around him shook suddenly, bringing a minor avalanche of slow-falling particles down on the crown of the suit. "Clear," he ordered. The bubble became a window again, revealing to Derek a chilling sight. The attacking spacecraft had climbed above the western horizon. It was still firing randomly, still carving out a path of destruction on the asteroid's surface. Time was running out. Shut down Subsystem 24. That was it. He was committed. With the leg controllers powered down, Derek could no longer walk. The modifications included burning through 3 circuit traces and fusing a fourth to a neighboring circuit as a shunt. Accuracy of the tiny laser was absolutely critical. A misfire could destroy enough circuits to cripple the augment permanently. With the help of the augment's pointing guide, Derek completed the work on the right leg without mishap. But by the time he was ready to start on the left, the vibrations from the more powerful explosions were more than strong enough to disturb his aim. As he stood trying to outguess the shaking ground, a familiar voice intruded. "Derek, please listen. Derek, you must stop. This is madness." 200 meters away on the slope of the mound, due north of him was a robot. It was Monitor 5, waving its arms and advancing directly toward where Derek stood. It was walking easily, with no sign of the damage Derek had inflicted on its leg. In the same glance, Derek saw that the reason the shaking was stronger was that the radar ship was much closer, more nearly overhead than he'd expected. Once again he was trapped between the raiders who would rescue him by killing him, and the robots who would kill him by rescuing him. "Go away!" Derek hissed. "Derek, you must return to the compound. You are in danger here." The raider ship seemed to have taken notice of the robot, for the plain between Monitor 5 and the cliff where Derek stood suddenly came under a barrage of pinpoint laser impacts. These were not the high-intensity weapons which were shaking the ground, and mercifully the gunners did not seem to be targeting Derek. But the surface in this area was nearly all ice, and volatile. One blast boiled away the top of the mound behind the robot. Another gouged a deep trench between the robot and Derek. Derek did not think that would stop Monitor 5, and he was right. The robot scrambled down into the trench before the billow of gas could even dissipate, and Derek lost sight of it. He could not afford to worry about the robot. Setting his jaw determinedly, Derek went back to work on the left subcontroller. Using the body Odyssey and auto-control of the augment to the fullest, he made short work of it. The 3 unwanted circuits vaporized in tiny puffs of atomic metal. The 2 parallel traces melted and merged into one. "Derek!" Monitor 5 called suddenly. "I'm here! In the ice! I found it!" Derek looked up. The firing had stopped, and there was no sign of the robot. "Close the panels," he said, then tongued the radio switch. "Monitor 5, go back to the installation. There's nothing you can do for me out here." Just then a metallic arm appeared above the lip of the trench, the hand clutching a small silver object. A moment later, Monitor 5 struggled out of the trench. Starting toward Derek, Monitor 5 raised the silver object triumphantly overhead in one hand. "The key is here, Derek. You must take it." The robot's triumph did not last long. The raider ship was now a great ominous mass directly overhead. Monitor 5 had barely taken a step when the laser fire started up again. Red targeting beams danced like spotlights on a stage on the ice around it. For a moment, it seemed as though the robot was going to escape destruction. Then, a dozen strides from the foot of the cliff, a laser tracked a fiery line across the robot's torso. An instant later, Monitor 5 disappeared in a silent explosion, all blue and green flame and disintegrating metal. Disappeared, but not completely. The explosion sent pieces flying in all directions. One of the largest, spinning so rapidly Derek could not tell what it was, came cartwheeling toward him. As it struck the ground and skidded to a stop, Derek saw what it was. Monitor 5's right arm, from the shoulder joint to the fingers. And still gripping tightly in those fingers was the shining silver object. A rectangle, perhaps 5 centimeters by 15 centimeters, the size of a remote controller or a memory cartridge. Could this be the object that the robots were so obsessively searching for all this time? If so, then why had Monitor 5's last act been to try to give to Derek. For a moment Derek hesitated. To receive the object was an additional risk in an enterprise that was already too risky, but he knew it was impossible for him to simply leave it lying there. Ripping the specialized end effectors from the augment's arms, Derek slapped the general-purpose grapples back into place. "Power up System 24," he snapped, and the sole red lamp on the augment status board turned green. His descent down the slope to where the arm rested was a controlled fall at best. With the leg servos jimmied, Derek could not control a walking gait, but he got there all the same, seizing the arm and the artifact in his right hand and locking the grapple. Gathering his feet under himself, Derek glanced upward to gauge the distance and angle to the raider ship. He lifted his feet on the control pads and the suit went into a crouch. He jammed his feet down hard, and the powerful legs of the augment kicked out with all their unrestrained might. Like a tiny spacecraft, the augment launched itself from the surface, carrying Derek toward a rendezvous with the raider ship. "One way or another, I'm coming aboard." Suddenly, the entire surface of the asteroid seemed to shudder and rise up in a convulsion. The robots had triggered their self-destruct blast, and the explosion sent a hailstorm of fragments blasting outward like space shrapnel. Almost immediately, the weapons pods of the raider ship sprang to life. At first Derek thought they were aiming at him, trying to get him before he was lost in the deluge of ice and rock boulders which had erupted from the asteroid. Then it seemed as if the gunners were targeting the debris itself, the smaller, faster-moving bits which were already overtaking him. Whichever was their goal, the net effect was the same. When he was within about 100 meters of the nearest part of the ship, and began to scan for a place to latch on with his free hand, the entire bubble faceplate of the augment lit up with a blue light that crawled in all directions, like something alive. Derek's limbs went numb, and his senses went wild. He had only enough time to think, "Not again!" before the light faded, and the darkness took him away once more. Despite all the tumult which had surrounded him as he lost consciousness, Derek came back to awareness calmly and easily. You could not say how long he had been unconscious, but it had to have been more than a few minutes. He was no longer outside the alien ship. For that matter, he was no longer in the augment. Instead, he was lying on his back on hard decking, staring up at a ceiling filled with small doors. Propping himself up on his elbows, Derek surveyed his surroundings. He was in a narrow room, almost a corridor. The long walls were covered with more doors, storage bins, and there's an exit at each end, or at least a tall metal ellipse which might be an exit. Derek did not spend much time wondering about the exits or contents of the storage bins. A large animal covered with molted brown and gold fur squatted on its haunches nearby, watching Derek. It reminded Derek of a dog, like an undersized Saint Bernard with the alert eyes of a wolf. But the face was too flat, the ears too high and pointed, and the forelegs ended not in paws, but in gray-skinned, sausage-like fingers. Whatever it was, he had never seen anything like it before. Moving slowly, as so not to alarm the creature, Derek sat up. When he did, the creature sidled forward a step and cocked its head. "Are you all right?" it asked in a guttural voice. Derek could not have been more surprised that the creature suddenly molted and turned into a butterfly. Not only speech, but standard, however curiously accented. "I think so," he stammered. "That is good," the creature said. "Our Amos will be pleased. He did not want you armed." "The best way to guarantee that is not to shoot at people. If we had been shooting at you, we would have hit you," the alien said with a tooth-baring grimace that might have been a smile or a threat display. Though the message was garbled, other body language was coming out more clearly. The alien's crouch struck Derek as a posture from which he could spring quickly. Seated, he was at both a disadvantage both in agility and in reach, a fact which he felt keenly when he met the alien's gaze. Their eyes were on the same level, but Derek felt threatened, intimidated. Still moving slowly, Derek felt for the wall behind him and hauled himself to his feet. The alien's only reaction was to rise with him. When they were both standing up, the tips of the alien's ears reached only to Derek's chest, and the physical comfort that went with being taller sifted to Derek. "What are you?" he demanded. "Your friend," the alien said. "What more do you need to know?" "There's 140 colonized words, and there's nothing like you on any of 'em. Where I come from there are 200 colonized words, and nothing like you on any of 'em," the alien said, grimacing again. This time the circumstances seemed to call more clearly for a smile, and Derek decided that's what it was. "Come, our animus is waiting." "Who is our animus?" "Our animus is ship's boss. I'll see," the alien said, turning away and starting toward the door. "Wait!" Derek called. "What's your name?" The alien stopped and turned. It opened its mouth and poured a torrent of sounds, not in any human alphabet, like a growl punctuated with a sibilant hiss and sounds like bubbles popping. Then the alien smile grimaced. "Can say?" Derek shook his head sleeplessly. "No, that not. Come then. Not wise to keep our enemies waiting." Taking a brisk, loping pace, the alien led Derek through 3 more compartments, identical to the one he had wakened in. Derek wondered briefly about the mismatch between his escort and the design of the ship they were in. The overhead storage bins were far above Derek's head. He doubted if he could reach them even by jumping. Unless the caninoid alien were as agile a climber as a terrestrial primate, it would need a ladder to get to their contents. Efficient use of space, terrible ergonomic design, Derek thought critically. They came to a tiny hexagonal room, barely large enough for both of them to stand in. It seemed to be a hub between intersecting corridors, since each wall framed an identical door. The alien paused for Derek to catch up, then continued on through. "Where do the other doors lead?" "Can't tell ya," the alien said cheerfully. Between the hub and the interior of the ship had different character. There were just as many walls and small spaces, but the walls were either of coarse mesh, almost more like fencing, or had large window-like cutouts. Together the mesh and the cutouts provided long lines of sight and feeling not of small spaces, but of a large, busy one. The largest space within this deck seemed to be straight ahead. Peering over the alien's shoulder, Derek caught glimpses of what seemed to be a control center, and of a figure seated at the console with its back to them. There was something familiar and human about this figure, and something wrong and disturbing at the same time. As soon as the caninoid led him to the control center, Derek knew why he was getting mixed messages, and who or what the storage corridors had been designed for. The alien sitting at the console was decidedly humanoid, and Derek could describe him in very human terms: a slender build, thin neck, almost hairless head, pale skin. But even sitting down, our animus was as tall as Derek, and he had the arm span of a condor. The entire horseshoe-shaped console, easily 3 human arms spans wide, was within his comfortable reach. Above and beyond Animus was a huge curved viewing screen on which 8 different views of the asteroid's surface were being projected. Superimposed on most of them were blue-lined targeting grids in small characters Derek took to be numbers. Some of the characters were changing constantly, and others seemed to change in response to our Animus's hands moving over the console and to the endless pattern of explosions and ground slides on the surface. "Prexil, Denotha, Prexil Mastica," he was saying, apparently into a microphone. "Diffe Optspa Neroxy." Derek took a step forward. "Animus?" The alien turned his head slightly to the left, and a chill went through Derek. The lizard-like eye that peered back at him was set in a raised socket on the side of Animus's head. From behind, Derek had mistaken the eye bumps for ears. "Shh!" the cannonoid alien said nervously, grasping Derek's hand and pulling him back. "Don't interrupt the boss. He'll talk to you when he's ready." Aranimus turned back to his work and resumed speaking. Derek had the impression that he was issuing orders, chiding, prodding, reprimanding, assigning targets, and grading gunners. There was nothing moving on the surface and nothing stirring below, and yet the carnage went on. After a few minutes of watching, Derek could no longer restrain himself. "There's nothing down there any more," Derek blurted. "They blew it all up. What are you doing this for?" "Practice," Aranimus said. His voice was high-pitched and he trilled the R sound. It went on for another 10 minutes that way. Millions of watts of energy expanded uselessly against an inert and lifeless world. Then Aranimus ran a fingertip along a row of switches and the screens went blank. "Write it," he said, and turned to his chair to face them. "What is your name?" "Derek." Only one of Aranimus's eyes was trained on him. The other glanced around randomly. Derek could not imagine what it would be like to view the world that way. Did the alien's brain switch back and forth between the two inputs, like a director choosing a camera shot? Or did it somehow integrate the two images into one? "This device you used to attack my ship," Aranimus continued. "What was it?" "An augmented worksuit, altered to allow the leg servos to operate at full power, but it wasn't attacking you, I was escaping." Aranimus's other eye pivoted forward and focused on Derek. "Were you a prisoner?" "I was stranded on the asteroid in a survival pod. The robots found me and wouldn't let me go. I had to steal that equipment from them and get away." "And where did you come from before you were stranded?" "I don't know," Derek said, frowning. "I can't remember anything before that." "Don't lie to him," the cannonoid whispered. "It makes him angry." "I'm not lying," Derek said indignantly. "As far as I can tell, 5 days ago I didn't exist. That's how much I know about who I am." While Derek spoke, Aranimus reached inside the folds of his clothing and extracted a small golden stylus. Seeing it, the cannonoid cringed and turned half away. "Oh no," it whined. "Too late." Aranimus pointed the stylus at Derek's side, and a pale blue light began to dance over the entire surface of Derek's hand. He screamed in pain and dropped to his knees. It was as though he had thrust his hand into a raging furnace, except that no skin was being destroyed and no nerve endings deadened. The pain just went on, sapping his strength until even the screams caught in his throat, too feeble to free themselves. "I know something of the rules governing robots and humans," Aranimus said calmly while Derek writhed on the floor. "Humans build robots to serve them. Robots follow human direction. If you were the only robot on this asteroid, then it follows that the robots here under your command and serving your purpose." Aranimus tipped the stylus ceilingward, and the blue glow vanished. The pain vanished with it, except for the memory. Derek lay on his side and sucked in great, grasping breaths. "I will know who you are and what you know about the object you brought on board," Aranimus said quietly. "To end the pain, you only need to tell me the truth." His face as emotionless as his trilling voice, Aranimus pointed the stylus at Derek once more. Chapter 8. Test of Loyalty. At some point it ended, but by that time Derek was in no condition to know clearly why Aranimus had interrupted his torture. He had only a vague awareness of Aranimus going away and of being dragged away from the control center by the cannonoid. Unable to either resist or help, he was taken to another section of the subdivided compartment and laid on a thinly padded board. He lay there drifting in and out of consciousness, sometimes aware of the cannonoid crouching solicitously beside him, sometimes aware of nothing but his own confusion and fatigue. In one of his lucid moments, when he became aware that the alien was holding a cup of clear liquid for him, and struggled up on one elbow. "You better tell Aranimus what he wants to know," the Canonoid whispered as it offered the cup. Derek tripped his head forward and reached for the cup. His right hand trembled uncontrollably, so he had to use his left to steady the cup, and he sipped the cool liquid. It was sweet like thin honey, and bathed his ravaged throat with relief. "How tough do you think you humans are?" he croaked. "If I knew anything, I'd have told him in the first 5 minutes. If he keeps this up, he's going to kill me. Why won't he believe me?" The Canonoid glanced nervously round before answering. "Do you know Nari?" Derek could not tell if the name was of a species or of an individual, but it did not matter to his answer. "No. Aranimus knows Nari. Nari asks to be forced to be honest. If you ask Nari a question, it will lie or pretend it doesn't understand or has forgotten. Hurt Nari enough, and it always tell." "I'm not a Nari," Derek protested weakly. "Is he too stupid to see that?" "Aranis thinks you use the Nari trick," the Canonoid said. "Besides, Aranimus is very angry." "Why is he angry with me? I didn't do anything to him." "When Aranimus is angry, everyone in trouble," the alien said. "Gunners were not supposed to destroy a robot nest. They didn't, the robot did it themselves. Doesn't matter. Aranimus wanted to capture robots to work for him." Derek closed his eyes and laid back. "I'm afraid there won't be much to capture." "Aranimus went to see what salvage team brought back," the alien said. "If truly not much, it'll be worse when he comes back." "Can't you help me?" Derek pleaded. "You believe me, don't you?" "Not my job to believe or not believe," the Canonoid shrugged. "Can't help." With a shrug, Derek lowered himself back to a reclining position and closed his eyes. "Then he is going to kill me because I don't have anything to tell him. And maybe that's just as well." The Canonoid reclaimed the cup from Derek's hand and stood up. "Perfect," Nari thought. "Don't let Amranimus hear you." Dozing, the first Derek knew of Aranimus' return was when the alien seized him by the arm and hauled him roughly to a sitting position. "It's time to stop playing," Aranimus said. "I grow impatient." "That was playing?" Derek said lightly. "You people have some funny ideas about games. Remind me not to play cutthroat 8-card with you." At that, the Canonoid, crouching in the doorway a few meters away, closed his eyes and began to shake its head. Aranimus's answer was to reach inside his clothing for the stylus. "Wait," Derek said quickly, holding a hand palm out. "You don't need that. Have you decided to share your knowledge after all?" I always was willing to. You just didn't want what I had to offer." "I know who you are, and I know about the object you brought aboard," Aranimus said. Derek slid off the edge of the bench and found his feet. Aranimus still dwarfed him, but even so, he felt better standing. "The fact is, you know as much as I do about who I am, and I wouldn't be surprised if you know more than I do about that silver box. But there is something I know more about than you do, and that's robots. How did your prospecting go?" One of Aranimus's eyes cast a baleful glance in the direction of the Canonoid, which hunched its shoulders and retreated from the doorway. "They brought back fragments only," Aranimus said. "Your robots were very efficient about destroying themselves." "They weren't my robots," Derek said. "But why don't you show me what you have?" Aranimus lowered his arm to the side and slowly massaged his knees with his hands while he weighed Derek's proposition. "Yes," he said finally, "that'll be a good test of your intentions and usefulness. I'll have you build me a robot." Derek's face paled. "What?" "If you do not know who you are, then you have no loyalties or obligations to any other masters. When you have built me a robot servant, I know that you have accepted your place serving me." Derek knew better than to pick that moment to make a noble speech about freedom and choice, but he still could not accept Aranimus's terms. "What if I can't build you a robot out of what you had? I said I knew a lot about them. I didn't say I could manufacture one of good intentions. I need certain key parts. If you fail, I know that you are either unreliable or have no usefulness to me at all, Euronymous said, and that I should not waste valuable consumables keeping you alive. Derek swallowed hard. What are we waiting for? Show me your inventory. Euronymous had not been minimizing the problem when he termed what the scavengers had recovered from the asteroid fragments. I would have said scrap, he thought as he stood in the ship's hold surveying the raiders' paltry booty. The largest intact piece was the one Derek himself had brought aboard, Monitor Five's arm. The next largest was a supervisor's knee joint. Chances were that it was from Monitor 5 as well. No other piece was bigger than the palm of Derek's hand. A badly scorched regulator, an optical sensor with cracked lens, bits of structural forms like shards of broken pottery. There were no post-uronic brains and no microfusion power packs, the two absolutely indispensable items. And all the Crown's horses and all the Crown's men couldn't put the robots together again, he thought. Is this all you have? He said with a heavy heart. Mercifully, it was not. In one of the storage corridors he was shown two tall lockers, each of which contained nearly intact robots. I see this isn't a new hobby of yours, Derek said, stepping forward to examine the collection. The new robots were of a familiar domestic design. He knew more about where they had came from and what they had been used for when he used a microscanner on the serial number plates found at various sites on the robots' bodies. Clearly, though, he was not the first human the raiders had encountered. There seemed to be enough good parts to make about 1.5 robots. One of the robots was headless, and the mounting circle on the neck was twisted and deformed. That told Derek something about the circumstances under which the robots had been acquired. More important at the moment, it meant there was only one post-uronic brain, but there was no guarantee that it was functional. The upper torso of the other robot was torn open at the chest as though by some projectile weapon, and the right shoulder area was rippled as though it had been seared by intense heat. Not only did that hold out little hope for the key components being located in the torso, but it also virtually guaranteed that the brain's power down had been anything but orderly. But at least there was something to work with, and an outside chance at least of success. Derek stepped back with the lockers and turned to look up at Animus. So, what do you have in the way of an engineering lab around here? He said with a breeziness that was more show than real. I'm ready to get to work. Animus nodded gravely. I will give you that opportunity. Answering Derek's query about a place to work meant going deeper into the confusing maze of the radar ship. Unlike when he'd been inside the asteroid, Derek found it impossible to retain any sense of direction. There were too many turns, too many short sight lines, and too few absolute references. Once he lost track of where he was in relation to the command center, it was over. Despite being lost, Derek was still collecting useful information with each step. He learned that different parts of the ship had slightly different atmospheres, and in the storage corridors acted as interlocks between them. In one section, something in the air made Derek feel as though a furry ball were caught in his throat. In another, yellowish tears ran from Aranimus's eyes. Only the cannonoid seemed at home in all the atmospheres. The ship was not only a maze, but a zoo as well, featuring at least 4 species. Derek saw 5 of Aranimus's kin, all of high rank to judge by the activities Derek saw them engaged in. Curiously, the cannonoid seemed to be the only one of his kind aboard. Most numerous were the gaunt-faced Denari, several of whom had been recruited by Animus to carry the robot parts. The Denari were short, bald-headed bipeds with garnered skull ridges like false horns, which made them look fierce and formidable. But it was clearly only protective coloring, for Aranimus and the Cannonoid alike cuffed and bullied the Naru without fear. The fourth species was the most interesting and most elusive. Inside the compartment where Aranimus's eyes began to tear, Dark caught a glimpse of a strange five-limbed wall-clinging creature not unlike a giant sea-star. It retreated as they approached and was gone from sight by the time they reached the spot. Fascinated as Derek was by the parade of alien biologies, he was also concerned about having so casual a contact with them. He knew that his own body was a host-rich biotic community: bacteria, viruses, fungi, parasites. He did not know just how different the aliens were from him. He hoped they were wildly different. The more similar their fundamental structure was to his, the greater risk that his symbiotes could endanger them or theirs endanger him. He could only hope that Aranimus had either taken precautions or determined that no precautions were necessary. He based that hope on the fact that the raiders had evidently had some previous contact with humans. The scavenger robots and the aliens' command of Standard proved that. But there was another mystery for his lengthening list. Derek was positive that human beings had never crossed paths with even one intelligent alien life form, much less four of them. To understand interplanetary politics, he had to know history and economics, but not xenobiology. Did the Raiders' present mean that he was far out on the fringes of human space? Or had knowledge of the contacts been made a state secret, meant only for those with a need to know? Were the Raiders pirates, prospectors, or pioneers? Had they perhaps come looking for the same thing the robots had been looking for? And having found it, were they carrying him toward their home or his? They were questions with serious consequences. Tensions were high enough between Earth and the spacers without any random factors to jumble the picture. An attack of the sort Derek had already witnessed, directed against one of the many human worlds with no planetary defense net, could bring war. Which brought Derek back to the silver artifact. If it was as important as the robot's search for it implied, if it was powerful enough or important enough for the raiders to come after it, then it was too important and powerful to be left in the raiders' hands. As much as he hated to be thinking about anyone's problems but his own, Derek had an obligation to try to reclaim it for humanity. Mercifully, the lab was located in a section with a normal atmosphere, though the air was a bit warm and dry. While Aranimus settled into a chair and supervised the Narvi's arrangement of the robot parts on the open areas of the floor, Derek browsed the workbench and the wall racks with the Cannonoid at his elbow to answer questions. By the time he finished, the Narvi were gone. "Explain each step as you perform it," the Aranimus said, crossing his arms as though settling into watch. "Do you intend to sit there and watch?" "I intend to learn what you know." "Then I hope you're a patient sort," Derek said. "According to your story, it took you only a short time to convert an article of clothing into an escape propulsion system," Aranimus said. "This should require even less time, since you only need to turn a robot into a robot." "You've got to be kidding me," Derek said, throwing his arms into the air. "I'm not sure I'll be able to do it at all, much less in an hour or two." "Explain the problem," Aranimus said. Derek bit back a laugh. In the hopes of loosening the noose Aranimus had around his neck, Derek had been rehearsing complaints that the equipment in the lab was too suited, too crude, anything to lower Aranimus's expectations. But his dismay was real, not manufactured. He had prepared himself for instruments designed for non-human hands, to having to have one of the raiders at his elbow coaching him, but he had not been prepared to do without what he thought of as the basics. "The problem is you don't have the right tools," Derek said. "I need a diagnostic bench, an etcher, micromanipulators. There's nothing in here that even pass for a chip mask, or a circuit tracer." Even as he spoke, he realized that he should not have been so surprised. Aranimus would not be so curious about robot. Aranimus would not be so curious about robots. Would not need Derek to have Derek repair them, if the culture which he represented were capable of making them. The fact that the raiders employed gunners instead of auto-targeting systems should have tipped him off that their computer technology was deficient. Aranimus stood. Such tools as are available will be brought to you. Describe what you need to Rolf. Aranimus's shortened version of the Canaanoid's name was almost pronounceable. And she will bring them to you or take you to them. She? Tarek cast a surprised glance at the Canaanoid. Interesting. Thank you, he said to Aranimus, and started away. As he did, 1,000 bees settled between his shoulder blades and began to sting him wildly. Gasping, his knees buckled. He grabbed for the edge of the workbench to keep him from collapsing on the floor. He did not need to know that Aranimus had the stylus trained in the middle of his back. Do not make the mistake of trying to deceive me, Aranimus said coldly, as the pain held Derek firmly in its grip. I may be ignorant of your art, but I'm not foolish. Save your words of apology, Aranimus said as the bees flew away. Show me results. Doubled over the workbench, Derek turned his head in time to see Aranimus return the stylus to whatever hidden pocket was reserved for it. Clearing the phlegm from his throat, he nodded weakly. Right, boss. Oh, whoops. Right, boss. When Aranimus was gone, the Canaanoid's face twisted into its macabre grin. You're lucky. Aranimus wants robots so bad. Otherwise, I guess you'd be dead now. Thanks for the cheery thought, Derek said. What exactly does he want them for? Can't you figure? Aranimus wants to replace Norway with robots. Aranimus is sick of Norway crying scenes. Do the Nori know what he has in mind? Nori been on best behavior since the boss told them, the Canaanoid said cheerfully. What do you need to work? But Derek had been thinking about something else. The Canaanoid was treating him in a way that could only be called friendly, and that was the best prospect for an ally aboard the raider ship besides. If they were going to be working together, it was time for Derek to stop thinking of the alien as it, or even she. First things first. I can't say your name even as well as Aranimus does. That's pretty low standard. But I have to call you something. Can you live with Wolfruff? Is not my name, but I know who you mean when you say it. That's all I want, Wolfruff. I've got some fine print to read. What can you find me to read it with? I can get you something, she promised. The magnifying screen that Wolfruff came up with was an inspection instrument of some sort. It had a display screen rather than an eyepiece, a fixed focus, and a tiny field of view. But the incident lighting at the aperture highlighted perfectly the fine grooves of the serial number engraving, making up for all the other shortcomings. With Wolfruff peering over his shoulder, Derek scanned the 15 lines of data. Do you read Standard too? No, Wolfruff said. Tell you a secret. I learned Standard so I not have to listen to Aranimus mangle my language. Derek laughed, and the sound startled Wolfruff. What I'm looking at is one of the robot's identification gratings. It'll tell me several things that'll help me fix the damage. The manufacturer, the model, the date of initialization, any customization parameters, he said breezily. He went on like that a while longer, loading his explanation with as many technical terms as he could in the hopes of appearing to be open and cooperative, while actually explaining nothing. He did not mention that if the robots were from Earth, the gratings would also tell who owned it, or that the 3 cryptic lines of symbols at the bottom of the screen were the programming access codes in the initialization sequence, the keys that allow him to more than merely repair the robot, but to alter its programming. What does it say? This one is a Farrier Model EG, Derek said, scanning. Customized for valet service and personal defense, he added silently. A body or a robot. Initialization date, standard year 32. Then he scanned the few words ahead and was struck dumb. "What is it?" Wolf said. "Is something wrong?" "No," Derek managed to say. "The robot was registered on Aurora. That is one of our worlds?" "Yes." "Is that important?" "No," Derek said. "Let's look at the other one." But it was important, and his hands were trembling as he took the scanner in them and rose from his seat. He remembered Aurora. He remembered the world of the dawn. Not the things that everyone knew. That it was the first spacer home, and long the preeminent one. That it was home to the highly regarded Institute of Robotics from which most advances in robotic science had emerged. No. Like a ray of light sneaking past the black curtain, Derek remembered Aurora as a place he had been. Glimpses of a spaceport, a park-like city, a pastoral countryside. He was connected with it in some way strong enough that the word alone had the power to break through the wall separating him from his past. At last he knew something about himself. He had been to Aurora. It was not much of a biography, but it was a beginning. Whew! What? That took really, 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 really long. Oh, yeah, that took way longer. This is a really long video. Lot longer than normal. Sorry for all the botched spellings, but man, my voice hates me right now after this. Anyway, thanks for listening. And, yeah. Bye. Oh god. My voice hurts.